pronounced two different ways. Let me get there. In this parashah, there is something known as a textual oddity. And I'm just going to briefly touch upon that before we go into today's teaching. Right? This parashah starts Numbers 25, verse 10. And this is what it says. The very first verses. It says, Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, Behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace. All right, we'll stop there, and we'll talk about that. There's a broken vav in the word shalom. A broken vav. Okay? And I'm going to read this from my studies that I did with the Hebrew, deeper understanding of the letters. It's a broken vav. Not supposed to have those, any kind of oddities like that. It's not supposed to happen. This is an exception to the rule, because it would appear to be a mistake, right? But it's broken. It's broken. All right. What is the significance? The story in Numbers chapter 25 is about Phinehas, who is the grandson of Aaron the priest, and his zeal to remove evil from Israel by driving a spear through a man who was fornicating with a Moabite woman. On account of Phinehas' act, God stopped the plague, and Israel was delivered from destruction. From a messianic point of view, we can see that Phinehas is a type of Yeshua, since it is written that he was jealous for his God and made atonement for the people of Israel in Numbers 25:13. Now, on a sod level, this is the mystery level, the deep level of understanding this. We can further think of this broken vav as a picture of the brokenness of Messiah for our ultimate deliverance. He brought us peace through, right? By his stripes we are healed. He brings peace between us and the Father through his brokenness, all right? Since vav represents the number of man, because it's the sixth letter, it has the numerical value of 6, the number of man. The broken vav represents a man that is broken. In this particular verse, the man has been broken for the sake of a covenant of peace that brought atonement to Israel. So, it's another picture of Messiah Yeshua and his ultimate deliverance for us. Through his brokenness, he brought us peace. So, that's the significance of this textual oddity, this broken vav in the midst of the word shalom. Okay? Now, as I said earlier before the camera was on for our YouTube people, we call you the YouTube people, I had the opportunity this morning to teach at a Christian gathering at 8 o'clock this morning. Actually, I didn't teach till about 9-ish. But the man asked me to teach on foundational faith. He said, teach on the foundational faith of Abraham and Sarah. So, I did that. And I'm going to give that teaching to you now. Okay? So I had practice on this. Alright? I had practice. I've already been through this. So, open up to Hebrews chapter 11, because this is where he wanted me to start, and we had a wonderful time this morning, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Ooh. Man, I tell you what. Smelling that bacon burning up in the kitchen, and I had a time talking about keeping the Torah, including the bacon thing. It was something else. All right, Hebrews 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And I stopped on that. Look at that. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. His faith caused him to obey. All right? And he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. And through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Okay. So Abraham trusted and obeyed. You got to know that Yahweh is faithful. He means what he says, and he says what he means. But I just think it's remarkable that the very thing that you see right away is obedience in that verse. Because you can't, according to James, you can't have faith without works. It doesn't work. Okay? All right? Now, turn to 1 Chronicles. Because I found this while I was reading through. From the beginning of the Scriptures. I'm going through the Bible again this year. And I came across this verse in 1 Chronicles. Turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 16. And this is what we read. Verse 15 says, Be ye mindful always of his covenant, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, even of the covenant which he made with Abraham, and of his oath unto Isaac, and has confirmed the same to Jacob for a law. Look at this. And to Israel for an everlasting covenant. What is a covenant? We'll get to that in just a moment. I also took them to 2 Corinthians 13:5, and we ended with this as well. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says that we should examine ourselves whether we be in the faith. We're talking about this foundational faith. Do we have the faith of Abraham and Sarah? Do we have it? We need to examine ourselves, and the only way you can do that is by the Word. You don't do that by people's opinions or anything else. You examine it yourself according to the Word. This whole thing is based on a covenant. Webster's dictionary says that a covenant is a binding agreement for the performance of some action. A binding agreement for the performance of some action. A covenant is actually a two-way proactive agreement. I'll do this, you do that. That's what it is. Right? I have a covenant. I have a covenant with this woman. And I wear the sign of the covenant. Right? Some husbands don't want to wear the sign. You know, they want to go around not wear a ring, you know, and say, well, it's all right, baby. Come on, you know it's all about you. Hey, Linda, how you doing? You're doing good. No, baby, you know I love you. I don't have to wear that. Hey, Barbara, what's happening, girl? You know? No. If you really have a covenant with someone, then you're not afraid to wear the sign. Right? All right. Abraham was given a sign of the covenant. Now watch this. First thing he did, he obeyed when he left Babylon. He had to leave his father's house. You know, that was hard for him. It took him a while. Because he was hearing the call, but it took him a while before he finally uprooted himself and took his whole bunch away from his mother and his father and his family. He didn't know where he was going. All right? Wasn't that enough obedience? But then down the road, Yahweh says, I want you to circumcise yourself and all the men in your camp. Now, see, he could have gone, whoa, hold it here. Come on, man. I love you. God, I love you. I really do. I got all this faith. You even said that my faith made me justified, right? You counted it as righteousness. So what's the deal? Do I have to do that? He could have stopped short right there. But he obeyed. Okay? We have a sign of the covenant. It's called the Sabbath. You know? And as I mentioned this morning, I said, you know, people don't realize, but in history, if you look at the history, there was an edict put out in 332 AD, a death sentence on everybody who was still keeping the biblical Sabbath. Constantine wanted them searched out. People lost their lives. Them silly Jews. Why couldn't they just gone along with what Constantine... And some of them weren't even Jews. They were Italians that were just believing that God said what he meant and meant what he said, and were wanting to keep the sign of the covenant, and they lost their lives. If there was an edict like that today, I'd be dead, and the rest of you. If you stayed faithful to it, you'd be dead too. Right? It's costly. But if we're going to be children of Abraham and Sarah, then we have to do what they did. Right? They didn't just trust, they also obeyed. That's what makes you a son of Abraham. You get out of Babylon, and you keep the sign of the covenant. You do what he tells you to do. John 3:36, if you have a good translation, says that he that believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not obey the Son will not see life, but the wrath of Elohim abides upon him. Okay? So it's not just about trust. All the way through the Bible, we see it's trust and obey. Trust and obey. Okay? And then I told my story. A little bit of a story here. 30 years ago, I was a licensed minister in a Christian organization. It was with the Ministerial Fellowship of USA. This was a ministry that was headed up by the daughter and son-in-law of the late John G. Lake. Anybody know who John G. Lake was? Great author from the last century. Okay? I was an active member of Word of Life Christian Center in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I went to the Bible college there for a few years. I was well versed in all of Christian doctrine. Okay? My attitude toward the Old Testament law was much in the same as many Christians today. But something was missing. And I knew the pieces in my theology just weren't fitting. Okay? So 30 years ago, in 1986, I uprooted myself and I moved to Israel. Nobody sent me. I just felt I had to go. Okay? I moved to Israel and I began a quest that you might say was a search for the foundational faith of our father Abraham. Okay? That I spoke about today. And over the course of the past 30 years, I've learned a few things. Here's what I've learned. First, I let the Word speak for itself. Commentaries of men, including the so-called church fathers, see, it doesn't matter how old it is, it's still a commentary, are speculative. And the reason is because everybody has a bias. Every one of us has a bias. The only thing is you have to know that your bias is reasonable. You have to question your own bias and make sure that it's reasonable and it lines up with the Word. That's what you have to do, okay? And the other thing is, I learned not to stop short at English translations, okay? I've taken the time to study a little bit more and go down into the Strongs and see what the Greek says. You need to look at things at the original languages. Hebrew and Aramaic are the original languages of the Scriptures, all right? But even if you go back to the Greek, you will find that it will clear up much of what appears to be contradictions, because there are apparent contradictions in the Scriptures if you just go with the English, okay? You've got to go back and you've got to study words out sometimes so that you can clear up those apparent contradictions and discrepancies, okay? If I had been asked to speak on the topic of the foundational faith of Abraham and Sarah 30 years ago, I would have taken people to Romans 4:3, where it says that he believed and God counted it to him as righteousness. There you go. That pretty much would have been the end of it, because that was all I understood. It's all I was ever taught about Abraham, that he believed, he had faith, and God counted it to him as righteousness. But that is not my message today. Okay? I want you to notice something. Yahweh's covenant was with Isaac. Go back to Genesis 26. When the time came for his covenant to go to the son, something remarkable I want you to notice. Bereshit, chapter 26, verse 4. It says, I will make, this is, Yah is speaking to Isaac, I will make your seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto your seed all these countries, and in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Look at the very first word of the next verse. Because. See, look, I'm doing this for you because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Here's the question. What do you mean he kept the law? Moses wasn't born yet. How did Abraham keep the law? Because the law came through Moses. Huh? The Sabbath was given back in Genesis chapter 2. And Noah understood the distinction between clean and unclean. How did he know that back in Genesis chapter 7? Look at Jeremiah 6. Let me show you something. Go to Jeremiah 6. This, I think, was the verse that turned you around, wasn't it? Okay? My wife came across this before she was my wife. She saw this verse, and it stopped her in her tracks. May it do the same for someone else. The Spirit will just sometimes enlighten you to see something, and you go, wait a minute here. Jeremiah 6:16 says, Thus says Yahweh, Stand ye in the ways, and see and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein. And ye shall find rest for your souls. But, they said, we will not walk therein. Okay? Focus on the word old. It's Strong's 5769. In the Hebrew, it's olam. Olam does not mean old like, hey, this is a dirty handkerchief, I got to throw this away. It means eternal, everlasting. Olam is something that never stops being. So it's always new. So the Father wants us to come to the ancient paths, those paths that they'll never grow old. They're eternal. All right? I would suggest to you that because Abraham walked with Elohim, and because Noah walked with Elohim, they knew the way. Back in Genesis 18, verse 19, take a look at that verse. You'll see what it tells you about Abraham teaching. God said he would teach, Genesis 18:19. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord. Do a word study on the way. Actually, if you do a word study on the way, the truth, and the life, the three things that Yeshua said he was, no man comes to the Father but by me. But if you take a word study on each one of those phrases, you'll find that they are synonyms for the law. Okay? I can give you some examples. The way is the law. Exodus 18:20. Deuteronomy 10:12. Joshua 22:5. It's numerous. 1 Kings 2:3. Psalm 119, verse 1. Proverbs 6:23. Even in the New Testament. Mark 12:14. Acts 24:14. Malachi 2:8. Isaiah 2:3. He will teach us his ways. He's going to teach. The law will go out from Zion. He will teach us his ways. We sing about it. It's a song. Isaiah chapter 2. Okay? The way is the law, is the commandments, is the word. All right? Yeshua said that the greatest commandment is to love God supremely, right? We taught that in Matthew 22, verses 34 and 40. Somebody came and said, what are the greatest commandments? How do you read it? The man told him, and he said, you've done well, right? Those two commandments are not brand new commandments, because there was a time when Yeshua said, I give you a new commandment, and it was love. Okay, it wasn't like a brand new thing that had never been said before, all right? Because you can find the commandments to love God with your whole heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. He was telling them Old Testament laws. Okay? Where did we get the idea that he comes up with something brand new that's contrary to the Old Testament? Okay? He says, if you love me, keep my commandments, right? How do we show our love? How do we show our love for God? I talked to somebody one time, and they were like, they weren't really much of a Torah keeper, but, she was saying, don't you just love him? I just love him. Just love him. Like, well, how do you do that? Right? 1 John 5:3 says, this is the love of God. That's true. Yes, that is true. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. I mean, this is all over the place, folks. That you keep his commandments. How you show your love, right? Okay? See, the messenger of the covenant, that's what the Messiah is called in Malachi 3. The messenger of the covenant. The Word made flesh, John 1:14. The one whose goings forth have been from days of eternity, Micah 5:2. The one who remains the same yesterday, today, and forever, Hebrews 13:8. The one who said, I and the Father are one, John 10:30. The one who said, I do nothing of myself, but as my Father has taught me, I speak these things. John 8:28 is not going to give us some brand new thing. He speaks in accordance with his Father. Okay? Clear enough. The rich young ruler in Luke 18. Master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Yeshua didn't say, well, you just believe in me, okay? Sell all that you have and come follow me. He did say that, but he didn't say just that. What was the first thing he said? He said, keep the commandments. See? You cannot follow Yeshua. You cannot have faith in Yeshua apart from keeping the commandments. Otherwise, why did he tell him that? He didn't just say, well, just follow me. No, keep the commandments. And the man said, well, I've done this since my youth. Oh, okay. Well, then sell all that you have. Come follow me. It's both. Okay? Now, we're going to go to the New Testament. I'll show you something. James 2:24. Turn there. Okay? So if somebody has the idea, that the law is dead, I don't have to keep that stupid, stinking Jewish law anymore because Jesus set me free, brother, then you ought not to be reading James. Okay? Because James is going to mess you up. Because James 2:24 says this. You see then how that by works a man is justified and not by faith only. Whoa. Come on, James. Come on, man. I got to get a dose of Paul. Let me go over here to Romans 2:13. That's just too much for me. Let's go to Romans 2:13. I got to read some Paul. All right. Romans 2:13. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law should be... Oh, what? The doers of the law should be justified. Paul is agreeing with James. Oh man, I need a dose of Galatians. I got to go to Galatians quick. I got to get my fix. Here it is, Galatians 2:16. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of Jesus Christ. There you go. I'm okay again. Right? This is one of those places where you got to look at the Greek. Translators, the English translators, took a Greek word and translated it, but. The Greek word is enme. Combination of two Greek words, but it's enme. I find enme in Matthew 5:20. But they didn't use the word but when they translated it to English. Go to Matthew 5:20, let me show you. Am I moving too fast?
Yes, but I'm keeping up.
Okay. You've been through this once before, so.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. So when you go to Matthew 5:20, I'm gonna keep your finger in Galatians 2:16 because we're going to come back here. When you go to Matthew 5:20, this is what we find. It says, "For I say unto you that except," there's the word enme in the Greek, "except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven." Why did they use the English word except, and in some translations the English word unless? Why did they do that? Because it's the same Greek word. Let's take the words except and unless and go back to Galatians 2:16 and put it in place of but. Watch. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law except by the faith of Jesus Christ. Reading from King James, okay? Let's do the word unless. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law unless by the faith of Jesus Christ. See, now Galatians 2:16 agrees with Romans 2:13. It agrees with James 2:24. As a matter of fact, it agrees with a whole bunch of other scriptures. It agrees with Romans 3:31. It says, "Do we therefore nullify the law by our faith?" Paul says, "God forbid. We uphold the law," right? It agrees with Revelation 12:17 that says, who's the dragon after? Those that have the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments. It agrees with John 3:36, right? Believe and obey. Okay? It agrees with Revelation 14:12. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua. It agrees with Revelation 22:14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Okay? See, the word is consistent. The word of Elohim is consistent with itself. It has to be. Or it ceases to be his word. Because he's not a liar. There's no shadow of turning in him. Okay? So it pays to study, to show ourselves approved. And remember this. Every one of us is going to be judged in the end with how we heard and what we did with what we heard. Right? The fact is that our part of this two-way covenant is obedience. That's what we have to do. Trust and obey. Like Abraham and Sarah, we are required to do something. Or our faith is not the foundational faith of Abraham and Sarah. In closing, go back to 2 Corinthians 13:5. It says, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith.